Scoring straight from a corner kick looks like the goalkeeper's nightmare. A freak gust, a 1 in a million accident. It isn't. It's a geometry problem with a known solution. And the reason almost nobody on Earth can pull it off has nothing to do with luck. It's called the Olimpico, and by the time you're 30 seconds into understanding it, you'll never watch a corner kick the same way again. A corner kick curls off the flag, bends through the air, and drops into the net. Nobody else touches it. The keeper dives late, and the commentator calls it a howler, blames the wind, blames the goalkeeper, calls it one of those things. It's none of those things. What just happened has a name. It has a history that goes back a century, and it is, quietly, one of the hardest physical acts a human being can perform with a ball. The booth missed the whole story, so let's run it back from the beginning. This is the Olimpico, a goal scored directly from a corner kick, no other player touching it. And the reason it looks like a fluke is exactly the reason it isn't one. It's a geometry problem, a solved one, and almost nobody on Earth has the mechanics to actually solve it under pressure. By the end of this video, you'll see a corner kick completely differently. And there's one part of the physics, the part that actually decides whether the ball goes in or sails harmlessly into the keeper's arms, that almost nobody talks about. We'll get there. I'm decoding this World Cup one hidden detail at a time. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Let's start with where this thing came from, because the origin story is almost too perfect. October 2nd, 1924, Argentina versus Uruguay. A friendly match, but nothing about it was friendly. Uruguay had just returned from the Paris Olympics as football's gold medalists, the best team on the planet. Argentina, playing at home in front of tens of thousands of fans, wanted to make a statement. In the 15th minute, a winger named Onzari stepped up to take a corner. He whipped it in. It curved. It went straight into the net. No other player touched it. The Uruguayan players were furious. Some in the crowd thought it was a mistake. Journalists who covered the match wrote it off as the wind. And right there, in that dismissal, is the same mistake people make today when they see an Olimpico. They reach for the easiest explanation: lucky bounce, keeper error, freak gust. But here's what makes that original goal remarkable beyond just the moment. The rules had only just been changed to allow it. 4 months earlier, in June 1924, the game's governing body formally made it legal to score a goal directly from a corner kick. Before that, you had to touch another player first. Onzari scored the first one in recorded history, against the reigning Olympic champions, and the name stuck: Goal Olimpico, the Olympic goal, named as a dig at the newly crowned champions who'd just been beaten by their own corner flag. And here's the thing that should bother you. That was 100 years ago, and we still only see a handful of these per season across all of professional football. The rule says you can do it. The physics says you can do it. So why does it almost never happen? That question is the whole video. And the answer starts with understanding one force, one you already know from our altitude episode. When a ball spins through the air, the spin drags the air around it. One side of the ball has air rushing faster over it, the other side slower. That pressure difference shoves the ball sideways in flight. That's the Magnus effect, the same sideways force we broke down in the altitude video. You already know that piece. Here's what we didn't cover there. The Magnus effect doesn't care how much the ball curves. What it cares about is the spin axis, the invisible line the ball rotates around. And that axis is set the moment your foot makes contact. Specifically, it's set by where on the ball your foot strikes it. Hit the ball through its center and it flies straight. Hit it slightly off center, to the left or right of the midline, and you tilt the spin axis. And the Magnus force pulls the ball sideways through the air. So the real question for an Olimpico isn't, how do I make the ball curve? Every corner kick curves. The question is, where exactly do I strike it so the ball curves in the right direction, at the right rate, along a path that actually ends inside the goal? That's a completely different problem, and that's where the geometry gets brutal. Here's the part nobody sees when they watch a corner kick. Stand at the corner flag and look toward the goal. You're almost parallel to the goal line. The near post is more than 30 yards away, down the line to your side. The far post, nearly 40, The goal mouth is 8 yards wide and about 8 feet tall, but from where you're standing, the angle is so acute that almost the entire goal is hidden behind the near post. You can't aim at the goal the way a striker aims at the goal. You're shooting almost sideways at a rectangle you can barely see. To score from there, without anyone else touching the ball, you have to bend it. Not just a little, dramatically. The ball has to start its flight moving away from goal, out toward the near post or even slightly past it, and then curve back in. It has to swing like a boomerang, except it can't come back too far or it flies over the bar, and it can't curve too early or it hits the near post or gets caught by the first defender standing on the goal line. Think about what that means geometrically. You're threading a 3D needle. The ball has to clear the near post. It has to stay high enough to get over the head of the first defender, who is typically stationed right on the goal line. It has to swing hard enough back toward goal that the keeper can't just step forward and catch it. And it has to die, lose enough height from the curve so it drops under the crossbar before it crosses the line. 4 simultaneous constraints, 1 kick. And here's why the keeper is actually the worst positioned person on the pitch to stop this. When a normal cross comes in, the keeper reads the flight early, picks a line, and moves to intercept. The ball is moving roughly parallel to the goal or angling toward the far post. The keeper's movement and the ball's movement are compatible, but an Olimpico is curving directly at the goal. The ball is swerving toward the keeper's own net, away from his hands. To catch it, he has to move laterally toward the near post, while the ball is simultaneously swinging away from where he started. His instinct says, step forward to claim the cross. The physics says the ball is going behind him. Those two things are in conflict, and the ball is there in a heartbeat. That's why you see keepers frozen. It's not incompetence, it's that the flight path of an Olimpico is the one trajectory in football that is most directly opposed to a goalkeeper's natural read of the ball. So now you understand the geometry, and you understand why the keeper struggles, but we still haven't answered the original question. If this is solvable, why is it so rare? Here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part I promised you at the start. The tolerance on this strike is almost inhumanly small. Picture the spot on the ball where your foot needs to make contact to generate the right spin axis for an Olimpico. Move that contact point slightly too far toward the center of the ball, and you don't generate enough spin. The ball doesn't curve enough. It floats wide or straight into the keeper's hands, or it knuckles unpredictably because the low spin makes the air separation unstable. Move it too far off center, and you generate too much spin. The ball curves too sharply, it bends over the bar, or it swings so hard it comes back toward the center of the goal instead of the near post, and a defender clears it. The window between not enough and too much is genuinely tiny, and that window doesn't change based on how good you are. It's just physics. Now add a World Cup, add 80,000 people in the stadium, add the fact that this is the biggest game of your life, your country is watching, and you've been running at high intensity for an hour. What pressure does to fine motor control is real, and it's measurable. The precision of a complex movement degrades under stress. Muscle tension changes, timing shifts by milliseconds. For most athletic skills, that margin of degradation is manageable. A striker can still score even if his shot is slightly off. A goalkeeper can still make a save even if his dive is a little late. But the Olimpico has no margin to absorb that degradation. It is the one kick in football where the acceptable window of error is so narrow that even a small drop in precision, the kind that pressure reliably produces, pushes the ball outside it. That's the rarity. Not that it's physically impossible. It clearly isn't. It happens. But it requires a level of fine motor precision that has to survive the most pressure-filled environment in sport, applied to the one strike least able to tolerate any wobble at all. And think about the ball itself. The Trianda, the official match ball of this World Cup, is built from just 4 thermally bonded panels and a textured surface, engineered for stable, predictable flight. And a more predictable ball cuts both ways. It means there's less randomness in the air to blame, and less margin to hide behind. If the ball flies true, the only variable left is the quality of the strike itself. Which brings us back to where we started. A corner kick curls into the net. Nobody touches it. The booth calls it a fluke, blames the wind, blames the keeper. We've now walked through every layer of why that call is wrong. The taker had to solve a geometry problem that involves 4 simultaneous constraints in 3 dimensions. They had to set a spin axis with their foot, a contact point so precise that being off by a small margin in either direction produces a completely different and useless result. They had to execute that strike while their body was under the kind of pressure that measurably degrades the fine motor control the strike depends on. And they had to beat a keeper whose instincts are specifically working against him on this exact flight path. That's not a fluke, that's engineering. The booth saw the ball go in and explained it backward, working from the result to the simplest story. But the real story starts at the corner flag, in the geometry, in the spin axis, in the window that almost nobody can actually hit. The Olimpico has been written off as wind since 1924. Cesario Onzari knew what he was doing, and every time it happens at this World Cup, if it happens, you'll know exactly what you just watched. If this is the kind of detail you want on every match, subscribe. I'm going through this tournament piece by piece, finding the physics and the geometry that the broadcast misses. And if you want to see how altitude changes the way the ball flies, including the Magnus effect we referenced today, that video is right here. Watch it next. It connects directly to everything we just covered.